humblemud.
Hey everyone, welcome to my second ever episode of Video Game Speed Dating. In case you're not familiar, this is a first impressions review series where I basically go on a first date with a bunch of games until I get a good idea of what each of them have to offer. After that, I'll rank the games based on common dating terms so you can get an idea of how I felt about them and how I see them fitting into my life. I went more in depth on the ranking system in my last video, so check that out when you get a chance, but basically the games I just absolutely fall in love with from day one and can see myself playing through until the end are relationship tier games. Meanwhile, games I just didn't vibe with and am likely going to drop are ranked not for me. Now, that doesn't mean that these are bad games, it's just like when you go on a date with someone and realize you're not compatible with them. Maybe they weren't right for you, but they might be perfect for someone else. And in between those high and low rankings, we have Friends with Benefits, which are games I could see myself revisiting several times throughout the year, Flings, which are games I might involve myself with for a period of time, but likely will eventually move on from one day, and then we have Second Date, which are games I need a little more time with in order to fully form an opinion. Second dates aren't necessarily good or bad, it just means that while I see some things I like, I've also seen some things that worry me a little bit too, so I might end up either dropping them or falling in love with them, who knows. While I am historically a monogamous person in real life, I think this is just a really fun way to categorize games and gives me a great excuse to try some new stuff. And I think I've got a really interesting list of games today for you guys, so let's get on with it. I've been on a really big fighting game kick lately and have been trying to figure out the rotation of games I want to jump around between. Over the last month or so, I've revisited Mortal Kombat XL, Injustice 2, Street Fighter 6, and 2 other games which I'm going to include in this video. Out of the 5 games I've tried, believe it or not, this one has been one of the most impressive. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles x Justice League Turbo, which I like to call TMNT XJL, is an amazing 2D fighter. The best way I can describe this is to basically imagine the game you would get if you combine the SNES versions of TMNT Tournament Fighters and Justice League Task Force, then rebalance the game, add new mechanics, characters, stages, and then fit the whole thing into this nice cohesive package with a solid story mode and a variety of things to learn. This game is technically a fan game, but honestly, using that term in this case is a bit reductive, as not only is there so much content within TMNT XJL, but this game also has actual backing and input from industry veterans. The game was developed in the Ikemen Go engine by Kamikaze, a legend in the Mugen fighting game space, and features artwork contributions and musical compositions from people who have worked on actual SNK games like The King of Fighters, Art of Fighting, Fatal Fury, Samurai Showdown, and Metal Slug. The original voice actors for April O'Neil and Casey Jones lent their voices to this game. Mick McGinty created this wonderful artwork, his last piece before he sadly passed away, and if you don't know who he is, he created a ton of awesome pieces back in the day, like the legendary original artwork for Street Fighter 2. I could spend an entire video just talking about the prominent people who worked on this game, but hopefully just the few examples I gave establishes that TMNT XJL is a special game that's a cut above typical fan projects. The fact that there are also characters added into this game that would have otherwise never existed, like the 5th Ninja Turtle that was planned to debut in the unfortunately cancelled Ninja Turtles 4 The Foot Walks Again movie in the 90s, is just astounding to me. Now, I'm not the best at this game, in fact I'm currently playing on one of the easier difficulties, but I really love playing as Raphael and Batman especially, and I'd highly advise you get this game if you're a fan of old school fighters like Street Fighter or Fatal Fury. You can download this for free, it works right out of the box with my Xbox controller, there are a lot of intricate mechanics to spend your time on, loads of single player content, 1v1 and 2v2 tag gameplay, learning all the modifiers for each character's moves are so fun, and there is online play. And while I'm far from mastering the game yet, it's been such a fun experience seeing all these characters together. And as you can probably guess, this is absolutely in my fighting game rotation now. It's a Friends with Benefits game for sure, which is probably the best you could hope for when it comes to something like a fighting game that only lives if people play it. And I will definitely keep playing this in 2025. While we're on the topic, let's cover the next fighting game in this list. The next game I want to talk about is
Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and Beyond!
Man, that intro is just so epic, isn't it? The best thing I can say about this game is that just starting it up, hearing that music and seeing this artwork, knowing the amount of time and talent that went into this game to rebuild it into something truly great, never ceases to put a smile on my face. In case you don't know, this was a massive project headed by Maximilian Dude and a staff of great people who took the original Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, a game that really fell short of its predecessors in the series, and gave it a complete presentation and gameplay overhaul. This game was criticized pretty heavily at launch for its bland, almost mobile game type of art style, and Infinite and Beyond revamps that game with this wonderful cel-shaded comic book look. Some other notable highlights I wanted to mention are the fact that people like Chris Redfield actually look like Chris Redfield, and characters like Mega Man X and Zero on the Capcom side or Spider-Man and Venom on the Marvel side just look objectively better now. The character designs are just much more readable and they pop against the background so much better. While I grew up on Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I had it on the original Xbox, it's been a while since I've played these games and there has admittedly been a bit of a learning curve for me. I would honestly say it plays much differently from even Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. I really feel like many features within Marvel Infinite were sort of an afterthought as well, and since the game wasn't terribly successful, it also didn't get the time to become fully fleshed out. The tutorial modes for how to do character combos are not great, which is unfortunate because actually pulling off the combos in this game feels amazing, and after spending some time with this game, I'd argue that the fighting in MVCI is among the best in the series, if not the best. The story mode, however, is abysmal in my opinion, especially when it comes to the dialogue. You have many characters just saying stuff like, "Oh, Captain America, nice to see you again."
X.
Strider!
Captain America.
Chun-Li, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange!
Come on, Hawkeye.
Dante, out of ammo. Can the ladies come out to play?
For you, Rocket, anything. Be good.
Ebony, Ivory, care to dance?
And while the story mode has such a great premise, for some reason they didn't choose to start it off when the worlds collide like in TMNT XJL, but rather they decided to start it off 88 days after the fact, thus skipping all of the unique opportunities that we would have had for character development and conflict. The roster is also missing the X-Men, which is a huge loss in my opinion, but there's still a fun roster here overall and I'm warming up to it. I'm really enjoying slowly learning how to play characters like Mega Man X, and Firebrand is quickly becoming a favorite. I mean, just listen to him squawk when he wins. Absolutely priceless. While I am really enjoying this game for the most part, and the work Max's team has done is undoubtedly a 10 out of 10 effort that has really elevated the original game to new heights, I do have some reservations, and I hope that a community can form around the game because currently there's just not much information out there on how to learn the intricacies of this game due to its lack of popularity. And so for that reason, at this moment, I'm going to rank this as second date, because in addition to some of the reservations I have, I do think I enjoy the roster of some of the other games like MVC 2 and 3 better, but I will say I feel like the best is yet to come with MVCI. I'm really impressed with the way the fighting works in this game, and I'm hopeful that over time this becomes another game I find myself wanting to come back to.
As long as there's hope, we can change the future.
Every now and then, I get a little craving for some Pokémon type action, but I'm not the biggest fan of most of Game Freak's latest efforts. Enter Monster Hunter Stories. I passed over the 3DS version back in the day, but recently saw a friend posting screenshots from the Switch version, and I just thought the colors really popped. I had to try it. And so the day before Christmas, actually, I won an eBay auction and I got the Monster Hunter Stories collection for really cheap. And I also did this little ASMR unboxing video just for fun. I honestly like the Monster Hunter universe a lot, despite not playing a ton of the mainline games. For example, another character I've been trying out in Marvel Infinite Beyond is actually the Monster Hunter. And in the past, spin-off games like Dragon Quest Builders 2 were actually what got me into the mainline Dragon Quest games. So I thought maybe this spin-off might get me into Monster Hunter, just in time for the new Monster Hunter Wilds that's dropping later this year. The Switch version brings much better graphics in comparison to the 3DS version obviously, though you can see the bones of this being a 3DS game in some places. Really great, entirely new cutscenes, and the game as a whole just feels incredibly cozy. It has its own art style, which feels like a mix between Pokemon and the Wind Waker, lots of charm and humor, like everyone in the village is so cheery and happy, and then you read the dialogue from Knuckles, the hedge guy over here, who just says stuff like,
Hey there! Hey there!
He has good reason though, trust me. It's not terribly challenging and has a sort of rock, paper, scissors element to its battle mechanics and light versions of the many gameplay concepts you'll find in the mainline games. It's basically the modern Pokemon experience that I've been looking for, and there aren't really any issues in the polish department, which is not something I can necessarily say for the new Pokemon games. While it's obviously a spin-off and fans are divided on whether it's canon or not, the game does explain that the riders, who tame monsters instead of hunt them, are in a remote location far off from where the hunters are. So I like to think it's canon, why not? I don't know if I'm going to complete this one, but I feel like it's safe to say that I can at least rate Monster Hunter Stories as a fling. It's not necessarily blowing me away, but it's a fun world to be in, one that I could see myself spending a good amount of time in. It's scratching that Pokemon itch for me, and if I do end up beating it, I've heard nothing but good things about its sequel too. And now we're going to go from a spin-off of an action RPG to a spin-off of a mostly turn-based RPG series. I finally got my hands on Theatrhythm Final Bar Line. This is a rhythm game with light RPG elements themed around the music from the Final Fantasy series, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen people say this is one of the most addicting and fun games on the Switch. Now, I've not played every entry in the Final Fantasy series, but I still picked this up because I think hearing a song in this game for the first time, and then hearing it again when I actually play the corresponding mainline game, will be a treat all the same as it would be experiencing it in the reverse order. If you factor in the DLC, this game has like 500 tracks in total from a slew of the mainline Final Fantasy games, as well as some of the sub-series like Tactics and Dissidia, and has music from other Square Enix series like Saga or Chrono. You play through each of the Final Fantasy games, build out your party who fights in battles and travels along the map in correspondence with how well you do in the rhythm component of the game, and you can also mix and match your favorite characters from each game as you play and unlock them. They level up after a number of battles and learn new abilities just like in the actual games. As far as the rhythmic gameplay goes, it actually reminds me a lot of the Donkey Konga games, you know, the ones with the bongos. Except this is much better because Trapped is in Donkey Konga and is nowhere to be found in Theatrhythm. The music in this game is great, of course, and the rhythmic hits you do really add to and make you feel like you're a part of the composition. The only thing I didn't like at first was the sliding note function, which makes you think you would gradually tilt your joysticks in conjunction with the curvature of the notes, but you will actually be far more successful just going full tilt up or down with the control stick. But once I learned that, it just clicked. I love the presentation of this game. It's exactly the kind of casual drop in and play for 10 minutes type of experience that I was looking for. However, I will warn you, it gets addictive, so you might be playing way more than 10 minutes. And so overall, this was easily a Friends with Benefits game that I could see myself playing continually throughout the year. I don't know if I'll necessarily beat the whole thing, but I have beaten Final Fantasy 1, 2, and Tactics for my first date, and it's been really fun. Now we're going to go from fighting goblins with the power of music to kicking orcs off ledges and cliffsides with Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. I kept seeing videos of this game occasionally on social media showing off how ahead of its time the gameplay of Dark Messiah is, and it's been on my backlog forever, so when I was dreaming up this list, I felt like now was the time. To be honest with you, I enjoyed this game so much that I actually didn't stop playing it and I beat it before I even started working on this video. If you watched my top 10 games played in 2024 video, you know I became a huge fan of Dishonored last year, and Arcane Studios, who developed that game, also did this one. The DNA is definitely there in the gameplay, and while I don't think this one is quite as good as Dishonored, it is so cool to be able to have such a wealth of gameplay variety in a game that aesthetically reminds me of something like Skyrim, Morrowind, or Oblivion. The footage I'm sharing is mostly from the earlier games, so I don't have examples of everything I'm about to mention, but you can become a world-class stealth master, a brute who just knows how to swing a sword really hard, an archer, or a mage, or a little bit of all of these things. And there are so many ways to interact with the environment and approach each combat encounter. You can go in loud and simply defeat your enemies by bonking them on the head until they die. You can throw down jars of oil to set up a fire trap to lure your enemies into. You can freeze enemies or the floor below them and make them slip. You can possess enemies and make them fight amongst themselves. And in my case in particular, I became a jack of all trades, so I was oftentimes using both bows and arrows and spells and swords, and sneaking up to people and assassinating them, all within the same combat encounter. I can't overstate enough how fun the gameplay is here. The story isn't nearly as good, but it does have some fun twists and decisions to make, and another crowning achievement that this game pulls off is its atmosphere, which it just has in droves. I took so many screenshots playing this game. Obviously, this was a relationship status game for me, as I've already played it all the way through until the end. As a whole, I thought it was a great experience, save for some janky moments, one area close to the end where I experienced some frame drops, and some of the overtly horny dialogue given out by one of the love interests of this game can feel a little cringy at times.
I'm a friend, an ally, and I could be even more.
She can also be pretty funny too, though, to be fair. I just feel like parts of her dialogue were definitely written to entice 13-year-old boys in 2006. Gameplay-wise though, this game is a blast, and I honestly wish Elder Scrolls played more like this. Another game I've had on my I want to play this list for years, even longer than Dark Messiah actually, is While I think the Wii version is a perfectly fine way to play, and maybe even the best way still with the Wiimote capabilities, I got Okami HD on sale before the holidays for my Switch and wanted to experience those wonderful visuals for the first time in high definition. I've since played through the beginning sections of this game, and I'm absolutely in love with the art direction and ambiance that Okami provides. The story is told in such a way that it feels like you're living through what will one day become ancient Japanese folklore, and I love all the whimsical and ethereal characters you encounter within just the first hour alone. Oddly enough, similar to Dark Messiah, there was some mild horniness in the opening hours of this game too, which felt a little tonally off from the otherwise almost Studio Ghibli type vibe this game gives, and I didn't really expect that, but Okami was also made in 2006, so I guess writers back then just had to include a little bit of that where they could. Regardless though, I think the Celestial Brush mechanic is really cool, the combat is fun, and I'm enjoying the story as a whole so far. I can't imagine how playing this on the Wii back in the day especially must have felt. There were so many moments, even in the opening hours, where I was just amazed and had to take a step back and admire the scenery. However, despite my strong initial impressions, I've heard this game is apparently a little on the longer side, and many people say it kind of overstays its welcome, so for now I'm going to categorize this one as a second date. It's really capturing my imagination right now, but I'm worried that if I run into too many pacing issues or if the gameplay eventually gets repetitive, I might hop off of it. I would really like to continue it and see it all the way through though, so I can hopefully go straight into the recently announced Okami 2 when that drops. But we'll see how everything shakes out. Let me know down below what you guys think of Okami. Is it something I should definitely stick with, or do you agree that it gets a little old after a while? I seriously don't know what to expect, so definitely let me know what you think. So yeah, I think that about does it for this episode of Video Game Speed Dating. Here are my final rankings for this episode, with the leftmost games being the ones I think I enjoyed the most based on first impressions. Just remember though that these rankings don't necessarily indicate that I think Dark Messiah is better than Okami, for example. It just means that this is currently how I see these games fitting into my life. Things can always change with time. If you like this format, please leave a like and comment on it, because I really like to continue doing this series and see it thrive. If you didn't see the first episode, I covered 8 games there, and I think it was also a really fun and varied little collection of titles. So pop on over to that one too if you haven't seen it yet and give it some love. I'm curious to see your thoughts on the games mentioned if you've played any of these yourself. Let me know if any of these intrigued you, and let me know which games you might be giving a shot this year. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble.